And the chief will go over the budget now.
So if we could turn to page 14. And as you're aware, our first apportionment usually comes in December or January. So from the revenue side, we don't have too much of a picture yet. So we're still waiting on those numbers. Our filing fees are probably slightly down from last year just due to less permits being pulled than we saw the year previous. But other than that, everything is relatively in line. Our ambulance income is up. We ran 60 transports last year, and that's just catching up on those. So from the revenue side, really not too much to report on just yet. Any questions on the revenues?
Yeah.
Okay. Going through the expenses, so looking at personnel costs, we're at 5 out of 13 payrolls, which would put us roughly at about 39%. Some of these categories get used up disproportionately across the year, such as we pay off our PERS at the front end. So we're looking relatively in line for our expense costs. Our extra help is high because we do have Chief Brooks assisting us for about 3-month period here, which we appreciate. But overall, the personal costs are in line. No questions, I'll move on to admin expenses.
I have one question.
Sure.
Under 5,300 admin expenses, just under publications, just remind us again what publications we're spending the $12,000 on?
Publications. So there's generally, I believe that includes a lot of our NFPA codes. And there are some other things that prevention uses. I'm trying to think of what other publications. Yeah, the California Fire Code. We also been trying to figure out exactly right now. Lexapol, we've been putting somewhere else, but that's something with the SOPs that I think we've considered putting there. So the big one in the past has been the NFPA codes, just because there's a cost associated with those. So,
Okay, just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
yep. And just covering admin expenses in general, again, everything is relatively line. We're sitting at 30%. We did ask legal to give us a couple opinions on a couple items, so I do expect we'll have some costs in there, but it should be within budget. On the audit, this includes last year's audit. I did reach out to the town, put out an RFP for their auditing services. They were only able to have one consultant that was interested in providing an audit for the town and county, so they went with that person. I reached out to them as well. We did kind of an informal process with them. Their bid came in about 3 times as high as Don Cole, who we use on a regular basis. Speaking with Bill Green, he was comfortable using Don Cole again this year. He thinks that while there's value in switching auditors, so you get a fresh perspective, it also takes a little bit to get caught up in between all the other changes occurring at the district. Made sense to keep the current auditor. So the intent is to work with Don Cole. He'll try to get up here within the next few months to conduct our audits. From logistics, everything is relatively in line at this time. We will have some rig costs for some repairs on 33, but don't have any estimates on those yet. Again, we were waiting till we got out of the wildland season before we worked on those. So overall, that category is within budget. Any questions on concerns on those? And then moving to page 16. Again, prevention is a little low just because we haven't sent so many things to Interwest. So that's, but it's kind of dragging along there. Training is relatively in line with where we usually see it, and utilities are slightly high, but not disproportionately for how much costs have gone up. Again, those fluctuate and sometimes they come in a little late. The town doesn't always get us the fuel costs on time, and propane tends to be not exactly linear. So, still expecting those to not be great, but we budgeted high in those categories, so we should be doing okay there. So overall expenses are relatively where we expect them for this time of year. Any questions on expenses as a whole?
Well, thank you for reviewing that, because I had one question under fuel and oil. Just want to make sure that we're feeling okay with that number based on where fuel has gone. Are we okay with that, or do we need?
We bumped these up pretty significantly
Okay.
from last year, so we're okay, other than the fact that they have gone up significantly. Just to also give you some perspective, it's actually under buildings and grounds, but for example, disposal and waste, the town has put out notice that they're going to see a 10% increase year over year for the next several years. So, that's, I guess that is inflation, but that is, more than we budgeted previously for as increases go. So while we were prepared for it, we budgeted for it, it is still relatively high costs. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just one other thing that did occur to me, and I'm just wondering, all these years I've never known one way or the other, but on the fuel issue, do we pay the same amount as the town, or are we on, I've never heard one way or the other, are we on a separate billing? from the
I honestly
town?
don't know what
Price
the
per
answer to that is.
gallon?
I can see if Chief Walker knows, and if not, we can have staff investigate it a little bit. Do you know if our rate is the same?
Just
as
wondering,
theirs?
I mean,
It's a good
Uh,
question.
I do not know what the agreed rate is. Obviously, we know what we pay and the rate at that time, but it does fluctuate when they buy their fuel.
yeah,
But no, I've not asked
okay,
what, and I've not seen a contract either as far as.
okay.
We'll have staff research that. a little
Yeah,
bit
just
in
the
future.
thought, I mean,
Yeah.
if the town's paying $4 and we're paying $4.75, that's, I don't know if it's ever been explored.
Sure.
Good question. Okay, any more questions on the budget? Moving on to item 6B then, development impact fee study update.
So we're going to cover DIP twice in this meeting. This first item is specifically with the upcoming study. So development impact fees should be updated roughly every 5 years. The town has a consultant that they've hired to update their fee study, and we're piggybacking on to that. We've been meeting with them about twice a month, and right now fairly positive on the direction that they're going with their fees. They've kind of adjusted some of the categories so that we're treating people proportionally to, initially our hotel costs were significantly lower than, for example, single family dwellings. So making sure that those fees are proportional to the categories. They put quite a bit of work into that. And it's looking fairly good, hoping to get closure. They're just waiting on a couple housing dip fees that the town's working on, and a couple that they're doing for, I believe, the school district. Once they get all those sorted, then it would get presented as a package. At that point, the board could choose to go with those fees, which they do seem to be in line with what would be reasonable expectations. The board can also decide to reduce those fees, so that would be at your discretion. But at this point, it gives us the top end of what the district can charge in development impact fees. And except more to come on that.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Number 7, old business. We're going to have the second reading and consideration of adoption of ordinance 2022-01. An ordinance adopting the 2022 California Fire Code, applicable sections of the California Building Code, California Residential Code, all of which comprise the Life Safety Code for the Mammoth Lakes Fire Protection District.
So Chief Morrow and I can answer any questions that exist on the actual code. I believe we would defer to our legal to make sure that we work through the process on this agenda item appropriately, so that we open it up for a hearing if we have to, and then we pass it without, reading the entire ordinance.
Yeah, to that. So yeah, you do, before you take action, I would open it up to public comment. I don't know if there's any public there, but and then if you do not wish to read the entire thing, then any motion to approve should include a waiver, in other words, it would be waive further reading and adopt. And unless, of course, it's somebody's desire to read through the whole thing, I'm not sure that that would be the case, but so.
Hopefully not.
I'm not sure how many more readings we're gonna have before we actually vote to
So-
adopt this.
This will be the final reading, and this is your opportunity to adopt it as well. Just for your information, the town has it up tomorrow on their agenda, and they will, assuming that you adopt it, they will be ratifying it tomorrow. They're going through the first reading of their code as well as ratifying ours. So at this point, if you would like to do so, then you would open this up for public hearing. There's very little public here, so I'm assuming that it will close public hearing. At that point, you can consider adopting the ordinance and choosing to waive further reading of it.
Okay. Do we have any public comments or on the 2022-01 ordinance? Okay, we have no public on that, so we'll close that. And do we have any other comments on adopting that measure before we make a motion on it? Okay. Does somebody want to file a motion to adopt ordinance 2022-01, and we will waive without reading?
I'll make a motion that we adopt ordinance number 2022-01, fire code, California Fire Code.
Does that, just for clarification, does that motion include a waiver of the reading?
With the waiver of further reading.
Okay.
Waive without reading.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second on that?
I would make that second.
Are there any other comments or thoughts on that? Looks like no, so all in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Good job, Natalie.
thank you, Natalie, a lot of work, yeah. Okay, moving on to new business. Consideration of resolution 2022-07, a resolution of the Board of Commissioners of the Mammoth Lakes Fire Protection District approving the Department of Forestry and Fire Protection Agreement 21-FP-BDU-0257 for the California Climate Investment Grant Project.
So this is the grant that Natalie pursued and successfully got last year. It actually starts next fiscal year for a period of 3 years for a sum of roughly $500,000. The actual agreement is attached, and because we are agreeing to those terms, resolution is required in order for us to enter into that agreement. So essentially, this is for the home hardening and defensible space work reimbursement, and Chief Moore can speak on a little more if you have any questions.
Okay,
Essentially, there was a little bit of a clerical error, so it went from 700,000, the initial that we thought, to the $588,000. There was two different numbers that we're reading, so they took the initial number and didn't actually look at the budget on that. So it's now it's 588,000. That this resolution will be pushed forward, and we should be receiving funds the end of June. And then we can start moving forward with that project.
Okay, so do you actually receive the funds or do you bill them as you go?
We bill them as we go. So as soon as the homeowner gives us the money and or the bids and the receipts, we'll withdraw that money and then allocate it appropriately.
And then how are we gonna let the public know about this?
We'll put out in the Mammoth Times and radios and let them know, hey, there's a grant available for this project.
Nice. Do you have any estimate of how much each homeowner is gonna need?
It actually all depends on what they use, and if it's just for ground cover versus removal of trees. So removal of trees, it all depends on the diameter of the tree and how tall it is. So it's all dependent.
Is this going, I'm sorry, is this going directly just through you, or is there another committee involved in this?
It goes directly through us. So the homeowner will get bids, they'll come back and say, all right, these are the bids we have. We're going to use this person and here are the receipts. So it's a 75-25 reimbursement.
Oh,
So the grant will pay 75% of it.
wow.
That answers the question I was going to ask you. Yeah. Okay, do we have any other comments on that? Sounds like a
It's good work to have investigated that grant opportunity and follow through and actually get the grant. That's great.
Okay, do we have any motions on resolution 2022-07?
I'd make a motion that we adopt resolution 2022-07 as provided within the paperwork.
Second,
Okay. We have a motion and we have a second. Any other further comments before we vote on it? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. That sounds like a great program,
yeah, good job on getting the grant.
you know. 8B. Mammoth Lakes Housing Diff Options, waiving of development impact fees or services in lieu of fees.
So I had some preliminary discussions with the executive director of Mammoth Lakes Housing. As you are aware, they approached us, it's probably been a year now, seeing if we would potentially consider something with their DIP fees for the two projects that they have for affordable housing. And initially, the board was pretty hesitant on waiving fees. That's actually, there's concerns with waiving fees in general, because what it does is you potentially have a possibility that if these are development impact fees that go towards a project, if you don't pay a portion of that, then that whole project in theory may not have the funding that it needs, so you risk future DIP fees. So in the past, the board has been hesitant on any kind of waiving of DIP fees. What the town ended up doing on their parcel project, another housing project, is essentially the town paid the DIP fees for that project. So the DIP fees as a whole don't lose anything and it gets paid out in that case by the town. So had some initial discussions with Patricia to see if there would be an opportunity for not necessarily waiving, but if the district paid the DIP fees, is there something that how Mammoth Lakes Housing could provide for us as a small district? There's a lot of things that we just don't have the capacity to do, and seeing if they could assist us with those. Again, it was kind of initial discussions. They were certainly interested in it. Again, the concern for us is going to be what is the implications for future DIF revenues that are brought in. And we want to make sure that we can secure those. So I do think that there's certainly some value in the discussions that we had. Unfortunately, it was portrayed fairly negatively in the sheet last weekend, that this was something we were trying to cover up, when in reality, one, we have not moved forward with anything. It was just seeing if their board would be interested in it. And the intent is to bring it to this board to see if it makes sense for the fire district as well. And then it obviously has to go through everything legally to make sure there's any value. And so at this point, we're just looking for some staff direction as far as what is the board's favor, in the sense that previously when this item was brought to our board, we were pretty adamant that we did not want to waive the fees. If there was a way to, rather than waive them, do something like the town did, where district paid it, but was able to get something of value from Mammoth Lakes Housing, is that a path we want to consider? And if it was, like I said, there would still be a significant amount of work we have to do from the staff side and legal side. You can see if that's an option. I had some preliminary discussions with our legal. While there are some ways I can let him comment on it, that he's seen it done in the past, it's certainly not simple. So we have to make sure that we're doing everything appropriately so we don't risk DIP fees in general. So I'll leave the beginning of the conversation at that. Can answer further questions as you discuss it.
Okay, I have a question. How did it get in the paper?
So I attended a Mammoth Lakes housing meeting,
Okay.
which there was actually very few people at Sweet Z. So it must have been watched by someone in the sheets, I'm assuming. I didn't actually read the sheet till this Monday. I usually read it over the weekend, but it's a little frustrating because it's actually not true. The reality is I don't have the power to waive any fees. That is the board. This was just some preliminary discussions to say, hey, it makes sense for Mammoth Lakes housing and it makes sense for the fire district. Are there some options we could do that, both groups would benefit from? But again, that is not my position to move forward on anything with that. We hadn't gone through the steps, and because it is, a significant amount of staff time that both Patricia and I would have to put in, we'd have to run it through legal. We first wanted to vet it through both boards to see if it's even worth doing, because if either their board, there were some concerns on how that's going to get viewed if they gave firefighters housing ahead of other individuals. So mostly looking for interest from both boards if this is even worth pursuing. So there's no decisions made at all. Their board is interested. They see this as something that shows collaboration and trying to work through solutions that work through both sides. That being said, it has to benefit both Mammoth Lakes housing and the fire district to have value. I think it's probably something we could research. I don't know what we can legally do and not do. Again, the town, did go through a process to pay the fees down for the parcel, so we could explore something like that if there was value. One of the tough things for us is, we clearly have housing as a huge issue for the district, and we don't have the staff capacity to always research the best avenues for us to bring housing. If we try to build housing ourselves, it's going to be a significant cost. The town was able to basically leverage grants and get about 80% of the parcel, the initial units paid for with grant work. So I certainly see value in Mammoth Lakes housing helping us on this. That being said, there's a whole bunch of factors that go into it on this perception. As you can see with the sheet story, that is something that we want to be very careful of. And it would be a significant amount of work for ourselves as well as legal. And it may be worth having legal comments on this as well to see kind of what our options may and may not be.
Do you like me to weigh in?
Sure, I would be in favor of legal weighing in at this point.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so Alice and I were talking and about the whole diff issue, and one thing is really the district or any public entity for that matter can't waive fees. They really just, there's really not an ability to waive fees. It's always seen as a gift of funds if you waive something that's really a liability on the part of the whoever's interacting with the city or with the district. But you can do it if the district decides to allocate part of its budget to basically cover the fees. However, you still run kind of into a gift of funds issue unless there is some benefit that can be articulated to the district. And that's the tricky part, I think, is, can it be, is it a benefit to the district where there's some benefit to it as a whole and not maybe one employee or something like that. And so that would have to be looked at as to whether you can make a solid case for that. And then there's, you'd have to also look at the issues as to employee housing, and, that can create some issues if it's not done correctly too, from an HR standpoint. And so all those things would need to be looked at. Cities do it, public entities do it. They reduce development impact fees in exchange for some contribution, typically by the developer. Maybe it's going to be some sort of improvement that's going to benefit that entity, generally, some sort of infrastructure, something along those lines. And then so the public entity kind of weighs whether that reduction in those diff fees can be, can create a benefit on the other side, but it's typically has to be done as the entity covering the fees, not really waiving them. So that's kind of was our at least preliminary discussion. I don't think we really want to spend a lot of time on it unless, because there was a chance that the board was just no, flat out no, and then it was kind of a wasted effort. So, but those are the things you'd be looking at. I don't know if that helps or makes it more confusing or.
These fees are coming from the new housing project.
These are not from the parcel. The parcel did actually pay us fire district fees. These
Okay.
are for two smaller properties, one being down kind of next to the lumberyard.
Oh, okay.
And these are projects that basically Mammoth Lakes Housing is struggling to get all their funding together. So they're worried they may lose these projects altogether. So that's kind of the initial reason that they reached out to us, seeing if this is something we could help them with. So again, I understand more direction on anywhere this ends up going, but I do think it's important that if we do take any steps for them, that we protect our overall development impact fee process. I did discuss the potential to do things like this with the new consultant. They said, like legal mentioned, there's absolutely avenues and mechanisms. It's kind of a board decision at that point. So, the town made a decision for their property. They don't do it for all of them. But again, I know that this board has been fairly conservative with trying to protect our div fees, which I understand. So.
I'm one concern I have is just precedent that it will create and the doors that will all of a sudden open up. Will that be a flood of other requests coming from all different angles? I mean, I just don't know. Secondly, what kind of a time frame are we on here?
So what Patricia had asked for initially was they want to submit a permit next month. They'd also be willing to pay the fees and then continue discussions later to see if they could get reimbursed. But they do have a deadline that they have to submit all fees by the time that they apply for the permit, which they intend to do next month.
I would say it's a pretty slippery slope unless they had something to really offer us. We're going to be protecting more people. And I don't know why we'd be giving up our fees. So I wouldn't really be in favor of it. Now, I don't know how you guys are feeling.
Well, it's like Brent said, that you open the door, these other developers come in and say, well, you did it for them, you do it for here and there.
That's
I mean, we just went over the budget. And we see all of the costs that are going up at astronomically. And I just don't see where we can be. I would like to be generous, but we've got to look out so that we've got enough money to take care of what we're designed to do. And
Sure, and the discussions with them initially were to see if there's any opportunities to leverage their expertise. We've also had requests from our association where they have people that lose housing. There's quite a few, if you look at the water district or the town or the hospital, they all have housing for their employees, and they can put them in kind of a bridge housing program while they try to find some other housing. The fire district just doesn't have that. So again, those were just some of the initial conversations. I completely understand the stance that the board appears to be taking. Those were kind of the thoughts, that avenues we could explore if, like I said, there was interest from the boards.
I'd be interested in hearing, legal had mentioned that other cities have done this. And if there's just a few different examples that can be passed along to staff, that staff could review. It sounds to me as if we don't have to have a decision today. But if legal could pass some information to staff to review it, to see if there's been big tangles as a result of it, or if it's gone smoothly, or.
I can try to cobble together maybe some examples of it as to far, here's where it's worked for a particular
Yeah.
public entity. Do that and try not to, spend an inordinate amount of time on it, but yeah, if that, I mean, whatever the board's desire is, we'll, be more than happy to take care of it, but if that's the case, yeah, I can certainly put something together.
I mean, as
Commissioner, if I could also-
Commissioner Wall mentioned, he's not really in favor of it. I'm not really in favor of it. But I feel that based on what you've said, I mean, we obviously have a housing shortage for our department. So if we can do a little bit of due diligence on the department's behalf and the town's behalf, I think it's worth a little bit of time. I'm not saying a whole bunch of time. It's just my personal opinion. To devote some amount of time to see if it's worthwhile or not. That's my feeling.
Sure, absolutely. Just so the one local example is obviously the town waived the fees for the parcel because town council felt that that was in the vested interest
Right.
of the community. It is a little bit of a different situation, I will agree, because they're trying to look for the housing for the whole community, and we don't get that same impact directly as a fire district. But that'll be kind of the most immediate example. I also, like I said, I'm meeting twice a month with our new div consultant, and they may have good examples to point to of where it's worked and where it hasn't worked.
Perfect.
Just
Yeah.
to give you, so what I can come back with a staff report as far as, what the potential benefits and negatives are, and making sure that we're doing everything legally as well, so that we're not, risking future
Yeah.
div if we decided to go down that path. But I certainly understand the board's concerns in the past. Like I said, having these initial discussions with Mountain Lakes Housing, they thought there might be an opportunity for the fire district to benefit. I can tell you if they brought in a grant for $500,000 for us, that would clearly be worth the $18,000. You just never know if that's, you can't promise that on the front end. And when I say it's, especially at the direction things are going right now, it's very difficult to find housing solutions for firefighters because you can usually bring them in, but they have strings attached that you have to fall within, below a certain AMI. You can't limit it just to firefighters. So it is going to be difficult for us to find good housing solutions. We also had some preliminary discussions if we could purchase some of their units that they've had on the market for a while at a reduced cost. So I do think that long-term, it's important that we have that relationship and we are working together on collaborative solutions. That being said, if this is kind of a, line for the board as far as protecting our div fees, I certainly understand that. We will do that. Like I said, for me, the frustration with this sheet was the fact that these are just preliminary discussions between both boards to see if staff should even put any effort into this. I do not waive any fees. I have no power to do anything of that sort. That ultimately comes down to a decision of the two boards if it is worth entering into any sort of contract between the two. So yeah, that's my.
And I would say at this point, it's kind of up to them to see what they have to offer.
Yes.
Are
and-
they even on board?
Yeah,
So they were interested and they, like I said, they wanted staff to research, could there be any value in this? So if we wanted to move forward, and legal can correct me if I'm incorrect, Mammoth Lakes Housing can submit for the permits, pay the div fees, while I work with Mammoth Lakes Housing staff. We see if there's anything of value that the two organizations can provide for each other. And then at that point, if they provide something for us that we think is worth it, we could say, we will pick up your fees in exchange for this. Again, it would just depend on what they could bring to the table for the district.
absolutely.
To me, that sounds like it's, we're buying time on our benefit and we're doing our due diligence, or you're doing your due diligence, and possibly trying to help two parties out. If it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. But if it works, it could be important for.
Yeah,
For both
and that was
sides.
the intent of this, is just to give staff direction. There's no actual resolution or agreement for signing here. It was just, is it worthwhile for staff? You know, we're pretty short staffed here. They have a smaller staff as well to even put effort into this. And we didn't want to move forward with that until we kind of had a consensus. Both boards think this is worthwhile. So if you do, we certainly will see what we can put together and if it makes sense.
How's the board feel?
Okay.
Are we
Yeah. I think
advising
sort of-
staff to go ahead with that or?
Sort of seems to me
Yeah.
the ball's in their court.
It is, it's
Yeah.
ultimately, their executive director knows what they're capable of, and they need to understand our needs. So it's really in, both of us have to work together to see if, like I said, we could put something together that would make sense for both sides. What I can do is I'll work with Patricia on that, and I'm assuming that she will need to have those permits out before our next board meeting. So they will pay those fees, and if we find that there's some sort of agreement that makes sense for the fire district and for Mammoth Lakes Housing, that we can enter into that. The other part of it is, you know, this is a relatively small fee. You know, at their board meeting, you know, it was more kind of the collaborative efforts and the long-term relationship. So even if they pay these fees, if we find in the long run that there's things that they can provide for us, that it makes sense that we could look at this with another set of fees down the line. So it's not necessarily that there's a hard deadline, but I'll certainly work with their staff and have something for you for the next board meeting.
That would be my recommendation and desire.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Go ahead, as long as they paid the fees, and then we can negotiate afterwards. If there's something, like you say, that they can offer that's beneficial to us, we can adjust at that point. So, yeah.
Makes sense. Agree with that. Okay. So there's no further comments on that. We'll move on to number 9, the radio system update. You gentlemen.
Okay, so we're still working through the whole process with the state itself. That's really been kind of our holdup with them. They seem to be changing people, like a lot of businesses are constantly. They're using retired annuitants and other temporary type folks. So just when you start getting a dialogue going with somebody, they point you in another direction. Hey, I'd like you to talk to that person. And then you start the conversation all over again, you know, try and catch up where you were. They either don't keep notes or they're doing a poor job of passing those notes on. So our last conversation with them, we actually had a conversation between our consultant, Jeff Edelson, who's also the mountains consultant and the county's consultant, and a rep from the county itself, which is Kurt Hartstrom at the moment. And we sent another email to the state, and they had basically said, hey, if you guys sign this document, we can get going on testing. They have their 6 sites that they agreed to put up, which go from the top of Silver all the way to Leviathan, which is right on the Nevada state line. And so coverage is really good per them along 395. So we have a chance to test the system before we actually go live with it. The problem was they wanted us to sign a document that said, you're going to join the system. And we said, no, we're just doing testing. And we're having a few problems with them as far as allowing us to use the radios that we've already purchased and the county's already purchased to do the testing so that we have enough. So we're working through that with them. We just got a new contact at the state, so we'll go through that conversation with them again. And we have not got a final agreement from them, something in writing from the state that says, these are the prices, this is the service that you get, all those little items that we've been bugging them about. And probably the biggest one in there is they agreed that if we pay for the 2 sites here in town, and if the county puts in 3 or 4 additional sites, they would give us a 50% reduction in our subscription costs for a period of time. And it'd probably work out, I think the numbers we came up with, like maybe 3 years or so if we went with their formula. Well, our consultant went back to them and said, from both the county and our side, and said, no, we want that to be forever, that 50% discount. And he gave them a pretty compelling reason, and they actually came back and went, yeah, maybe. So that's the big one we're waiting for. That would have a significant, for us, I think our subscription costs for 40,000 a year. So we'd obviously be paying about 20,000. And I know that number sounds big, but just as a reminder that you're actually just, that subscription cost is paying for keeping the system running, maintaining the system. They're doing it, the state, and upgrading it as equipment fails or newer equipment becomes available. So that's part of their contract. So the great thing is neither we nor the county will ever have to go to mountaintops anymore. The state will absorb the 2 sites that we're putting in here and on Lincoln, and then the 3 or 4 sites that the county puts in, the state will absorb those 2, and they'll maintain those and do all those upgrades and everything. So at first blush, I think we were kind of a little tough on the numbers, but in reality, it's no different than any of the other subscription fees that we pay for whatever that service is. I think the difference is we don't want the service to be sudden link. So that's our big piece. And that's why we want to do this testing. We want to look and see how's our coverage in town with just their sites before we even put our 2 in, or perhaps 3, and then see if we get some in-building coverage and those types of things on our handhelds. In the town itself, because of the sites, the way they put them in, we're probably going to get coverage from about 4 of their sites. Because there's one on Silver, there's one on Sherwin, there's one on Crestview, and we think all 3 of those will look in, and we might get a little coverage from another site that'll end up over on the Highway 6 area, then R2. So I think we'll end up with really good coverage. But for right now, we're still moving ahead with doing the things that we need to do here. Scott has got equipment ordered that we need to upgrade the air conditioning systems in the comm building. So we're going ahead with that. Jeff and I are working on laying fiber between the comm building and inside here for the connections for both our equipment and the states. And then I think, and Alice will have to answer this. I think our thought is if we really like the testing and how the system looks, then we would go back to the state and say, go ahead and order the equipment for our 2 sites here at Fire Station 1 and the second one up on Lincoln, and we'd move ahead with that.
On Lincoln, is it a whole new site that we're gonna have to put up, or is it adopting
It's
to
a,
an existing?
yeah. So we have a repeater up there for one of our command channels. The mountain is rehabbing that site. So the cell companies were all brought up there. They told them they had to clean up all the stuff that they've had there for years that have been abandoned. So they're taking everything off. It's the top of 23. On the lift tower, everybody had everything, 22 had everything mounted on the lift tower. We don't at the moment, but they're going to clear everything off that. Our new state antenna will go on that lift tower, and all the cell phone companies have built 2 new towers to the rear, which all their equipment will go on. And the mountain is rehabbing the building itself where our equipment will go, because it lost its roof last year or the year before. So they'll take care of all that. So we'll end up with a much better site. The antenna will be in a much better spot. We have good coverage with that site now. I think once we gain the altitude on the top of the tower, will give us even better look toward Main Lodge. And then for the future, we have this thought about putting one out maybe on Hemlock. And that might be a joint venture with the mountain, because they'd like to have a radio site out there for their equipment too. The good thing is everybody is looking at upgrading the radios right now. So the mountain's doing a multi-million-dollar radio upgrade. Us, including the town admin and MLPD all together. And then if the county, which I think Chief can talk a little about whether they have any funding for that, their portion of it, we'd all be upgrading at the same time. And the only people that wouldn't be would be the feds.
Yes, I think there's a couple of questions that still need to get answered. The nice one is the repeaters that the state's going to put up regardless are up. So as soon as we get the ability to use some radios, we'll see how that works. Currently, the way that it was structured verbally, the town has put aside about 1.2 million If you remember, we had about 300,000 put aside for this. They were going to take care of the site on Lincoln on 22. We were going to take care of the site here. I'm having some discussions with Dan Holler to make the argument that because they have more users, that we split that proportionally, so they might take on a portion of our costs as well. I think that's a fair argument to be made, and they're considering that. The one thing that I would caution this board on is that 300,000 is only paying for the repeaters. This is going to require all new radios kind of across the board. So, most likely next year in the fiscal budget, that's something to be thinking about. This will be a capital expenditure. It goes back to kind of the thoughts on how we really have to make sure we have our capital expenditure budget taken care of, and we'll have some further meetings on that down the line as far as what we can do to make sure we have enough funding in there. The other big consideration is, as great as this radio system is, if nobody's on it, it doesn't have much value. And my biggest concern has been the county, the rest of the county moving forward on this. Having some initial discussions a few weeks ago with Chris McCrassick, who now is overseeing that from the county side. They believe they should be able to get the funding together to move forward. This will move significantly smoother if everybody is on it, because otherwise, it would be difficult to communicate with our partners. So cautiously optimistic. Like Chief Brooks mentioned, it's not perfect. That being said, there is no perfect solution. And if I, try to look at this project 10 years from now, like he mentioned, the state's going to own all this infrastructure. They're going to keep it up and running. There's just no capacity in this county by anybody to do that. So what most likely is the best solution down the line.
When you make the statement about all new radios, are we talking all handhelds and the rigs?
Handhelds and mobiles, and within the station infrastructure, all that has to be upgraded. The current 90% of what we have will not work on the new state system.
So mobiles being the apparatus themselves. and the
Yeah,
cheap
so
cars.
my
Okay.
estimates for us to upgrade what we have is roughly around 250,000 to 300,000, depending on what kind of pricing we get and certain things that we do within that, whether we upgrade some of what we have, 10% or so that we can, or whether we go with one piece. We did have a vendor, Dog and Pony Show, where Motorola, Kenwood, and L3 Harris came in to show their wares. And the idea is, from a county district standpoint, we'll go out to them and say, give us pricing, for a very large buy of radios for the entire county and us, and then we'll have a better idea what that pricing is. So my estimates are based on kind of what we could buy things for based on contract pricing right now, that 250 to 300,000 number.
It's also worth noting for this board that there's significant concerns from the other fire districts on moving forward on this. The big one, as you mentioned, is the costs. Hopefully the county will be covering their costs, but this is a significant cost, and the subscriptions is not something that anyone's used to. The other part of it is they're all fairly attached to the BK radios that we carry, which is also, the feds are going to stay on a non-Trump system, and they're concerned about communications with other parties that do not move over to this Trump system. So again, I would note that I support the direction we're going. I think we're going in the right direction, but there is no easy, perfect solution here. This is, it's a compromise. Everything is. So.
Okay. Anything else on radio system update? Move on to item 9B, update on company and chief officer trainings. Chief Fletch.
So we've had 2 staff members that have completed their company officer task books. We've got 4 that we're still working on. One guy was in Patagonia, the other one had some foot surgery, and the other one's just been busy with life, but they are clicking right along. I've been working with Bob doing the chief officer ride-alongs, which I think have been going pretty well. My next duty week starts on the 1st of December, and then I'll have another one on the 23rd. We've been working together doing to go and get as much of the technology around here transferred over to where I understand what we've been working with and what we're going to move forward with. Then Chief Walker and I are going to be going to a command class in Rancho Santa Fe the first of the year.
What kind of class?
I believe it's structure, Command 1D.
Oh,
Yeah, if I could kind of zoom that one out a little bit, as you are aware, traditionally for the last at least 10 years, the district has worked with 6 kind of part-time volunteer captains and then the full-time staff. And that's what's made this work as a system. Right now, we're down to 2 part-time captains who are picking up shifts, Captain Salzman and Captain Freeman. The rest at this point they're still captains and they're responding on incidents. And that's kind of what's keeping us afloat from a response perspective, but we're lacking that capacity to cover shifts. So this group of individuals that's kind of in that captain class is pretty vital for the operations of this fire district. And I'm very excited about this group. We've got some there that have been on the department for a really long time. Sometimes the ones that hesitate to become captains are the ones that are doing it for the right reasons. And we have a couple of those that, in my mind, are going to make very good operational captains, obviously. And or soon to be Captain Taylor's not here either. He's in that group as well, working with them. We've signed off his paperwork. He'll be done on the 28th, getting a red helmet. So just chipping away and trying to kind of rebuild that staff capacity.
So I lost count on how many
Yeah.
are you working with now?
Yeah, so currently in the company officer and captain program, I believe we have 5 individuals that are working through it, 2 that have completed, 6.
Alistair has one sign off that
Okay,
I think is basically ready to go. Then we have Eggleston, Open Camp, Tesla.
yeah. So 2 have completed, 3 more are getting relatively close. Kind of our goal was to try to get it by the end of the calendar year so we can, and the reality is in January, we'll be getting started working on another firefighter academy, that's kind of the nature of this process. So.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that update. And moving on to number C, the update on the cellular tower at Station 2.
Okay, so we got drawings back. If you guys turn to page 76, I think it's probably the best page to show the locations of the proposed tower and equipment. If you'll notice in the northeast corner, upper right-hand corner, they show the cell phone tower itself. It's surrounded by a segmented box. And that's located basically 20 feet from both property lines in that corner. If you look down into the southwest corner of that drawing, up against the building, you'll see where the equipment would be to basically operate that tower. So it would be up against Station 2 in the planner area. So it was the one place we thought we're not using that area as is, and so it doesn't take up any of our parking or training areas. So some of the other drawings are just technical. I did notice on the last page, not the last page. Anyway, the page showing the tower itself didn't transfer very well. So I brought this up. Which page is that? So you can see what they kind of are showing as the tower from the side. It is supposed to be decorated as a tree. These are just the drawings. I can't,
This is the other one.
Mhm.
This is what he was talking about.
but size wise, it's, 80 feet tall. It looks like at the base scale, it's, approximately 24 feet wide with the foliage they show, big foliage. And for to get a real visual on it, we set the crew set truck 62 up over at Station 2. It's set up right now. There's an American flag on the end of it. It's set up at That flag's pretty much 80 feet.
Okay,
So we're gonna plan on leaving it up for a couple of hours after this meeting, if you so wanted to look at it from a couple places in town and kind of see what that would be.
So the top of the flag is gonna be 80 feet.
It's not exactly where the tower would go, but it's behind
Right.
and it's very close. So
close enough.
And on this, page, whatever it was, 76, did you say? Yeah, 76, that rectangle underneath is, I presume, the seat, the cargo thing that we
that's the
have.
current C train that's sitting
train.
there. Yes.
So, okay,
Its future, I don't know.
but that, I just want to make sure that's, that. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, speaking on that C train and also the chairlift tower, the intent was that we would clean up that corner of the property if it did go there, but just as a bit of a balance out the fact that we're putting a ball through there. I believe the chair tower is about 45 feet currently.
So where are we at with the timing on them
Yeah, so
actually going to the town?
there's honestly not a huge rush to move this forward when we pause that shot clock with planning. And it really makes sense to kind of go through the steps incrementally and appropriately. So the first part was making sure that operationally this would work for us and would impact our training and that sort of thing. So the site plan as proposed is agreeable with the district for our ability to conduct business there, whether that's training or operations or that sort of thing. So we're comfortable with that portion of it. The other part that we still have to iron out is the actual agreement with AT&T. I don't build a lot of cell towers, and I wasn't comfortable with that agreement just standing as is. So we reached out, if you're familiar with a consultant that does this on a regular business. He actually was familiar with the area, and he made sure we put in some language that protected the board so that, or the district, so that we're not essentially a subleasing now under AT&T, and we still have some rights to our property and that sort of thing. And he also gave us an appraisal of what he believes is the true value of that, and what we should look for in the agreement. So I did pass that on to the Yukon group, which is the group that's working through this arrangement. This will have to go all the way to AT&T for them to decide if they want to move forward on that agreement. So basically, once we have an agreement that we agree this is a fair contract and we have an agreement on the site plan, at that point, if the board was comfortable with both of those, we would start the process of making sure we were doing proper notifications and moving forward with letting everybody in the community know what our intent is. I didn't want to get the cart ahead of the horse anymore, since we were able to pause that shot clock. Doesn't make sense to even notify the public if it doesn't end up making sense for us. So right now we're waiting on that agreement from AT&T. Once that gets to the board, we can decide where we want to go from there.
Good job. It was a good idea getting that consultant. Put language in there, yeah.
Can you see the flag from here?
You can't see it from here. I actually did drive by the meeting. I think you can see it probably most significantly kind of from the Panorama Ridge Way area. It doesn't block Mammoth Rock, but it is prominent. It's not too visible from the places that I drove in Old Mammoth. You certainly can't see it coming in. So it's, in my opinion, it's a lot more feasible than it was kind of in the front of the property there. That being said, it is an 80-foot fake tree. So it's not like you can shove it behind a bush. But I do think that there's some good value if you have the opportunity to go drive around, see what that impact is visually today.
Is there any other photographs of what that tree might look like or anything?
They
I see the
did
drawing.
provide those initially, and they can provide some more now that if we decide that this is the site. So we'll work on those. You have to recognize, depending on who the artist is, that they're a little biased towards making it look great.
Right.
And that's where we felt that putting the ladder truck up is really going to give you a true perspective. It actually is probably more visually prevalent than the fake tree would be, because right now it's a red, white, and blue flag sitting up something green amongst other green things, it might be less visually relevant. So that's going to be a big part if they agree to our terms and we decide to move forward, is making sure we're presenting the community with a kind of eyes wide open view of what this is. It just doesn't make sense to get too far ahead if they just can't come to terms with us on the contract. So, but we would certainly add more pictures to that presentation and probably follow the path that we discussed before, where I would attend some town council meetings just to make sure that everyone's being very transparent about this thing and it doesn't look like we're trying to sneak something into the community. So,
Yeah, I've seen a couple that are supposed to look like trees down by Lancaster. And are you kidding me?
so that is another thing that actually that consultant made sure there's different quality trees, and there's a request for one of the top grade of quality for whatever that's worth. There's also language in the contract saying that they have to repaint these things if they start to not look that original color. So there is an attempt made in the agreements to make this look as good as it can. It could actually be 5 feet shorter. The actual tower only requires 75 feet. The reason it's 80 feet is to make it look more like a tree, essentially. So you've got that little triangle at the top that's doing nothing other than aesthetics. So we're doing our best, but it still is a cell tower that's
A lot of work.
Now, will this tower be covered under our insurance, or is there a separate insurance, for any kind of liability
There-
that might come up?
there is liability coverage in the contract. It's another thing that actually that new legal recommended, I believe, to bring it up to 4 million. So there is coverage. I don't know the exact terms, obviously. Once we got that contract back from AT&T, we run it back past our legal, but it was bumped up from what the previous contract we had started working with was.
Is it gonna be surrounded by something so kids can't try to climb it or something like that?
No, but there won't be any,
Way to get. up
my
there?
understanding is there won't be any ladder on it. It's just it's a pole.
Okay,
So and it's too big for them to
climb.
climb. And the foliage doesn't start, I believe it's 16 feet off the ground before it even starts. So they really have no ability to
Climb it.
climb it.
It is a residential area, so,
Especially the climbing community
yeah.
with ropes. And
Okay, I guess you kind of covered number I, chief, way on agreement terms. So moving on down to D. $99,000 public assistant grant from Cal OES for the FEMA COVID-19. Chief Brooks, you're going to talk about that?
Sure. So that was just a continuation of the grants that we've been applying for since COVID-19 started. So I think that was our third, correct, Caroline? So we've gotten, I think in total, somewhere around 325,000 from the feds for COVID. So all those checks, including this one, covered first, it's covered 100% of my time here for the 2 years that I worked under that COVID contract before we just recently changed it. So that covered all of that, except a few minor things in there. And then it covered any medical supplies that we bought for our folks for PPE and those types of things were covered under that COVID grant.
That's amazing. Good job.
Good job. And this grant actually comes from who?
So it's the way it works for this type of grant. It's a federal grant, and then each state administers the amounts that they allocate to each state. So Cal OES is actually the managing feed-through agency for that federal money. And originally we were getting, each of those was at 75% reimbursement. And then they changed it to 100%. So they reimbursed us back for the 2 previous checks we got and made up the difference. And this is 100%. So these numbers that we're getting are 100% of our costs that we applied for. Normally, they'd only give us 75% of that. The 100% reimbursement ends I think July. They won't, anything past that will go back to probably 75 or 80%.
Good job.
Substantial.
Okay, and moving on to number 10A. This is not a good subject here.
Yes.
Getting to the end of our term for Commissioner Schills, who's retiring at the end of December.
Yeah, correct. So I spoke with Commissioner Schultz about a week ago, and she confirmed that she would be retiring out at the end of this calendar year. What that means for the district is at the end of that point to where she is off the board, we have 15 days to notify the county, which is just a procedure that we have to go through. And then we have 60 days total or 45 days from that notification to appoint somebody. The good news is because this is occurring after the election, the new board member essentially has a 2-year period that you appoint them for, that they will be serving in that position. In 2024, it would be up for re-election. And I'm sure legal will correct me on this if I misspeak, but so we essentially have 3 months to try to figure out, who would be a good fit for the board. I'd recommend that maybe if 2 of you want together that can work on kind of a subcommittee to start putting a list together to bring back to the rest of the board on some options. My understanding is that they now can essentially speak freely to the public about this. Is there anything that would prohibit them from seeing if people be interested in that position, Brent, or?
No, usually, and again, I'd have to look specifically at the language on it, but I believe they have since they have the power to appoint, I don't see an issue with them talking to people. It's still gonna have to be done in, in an open meeting, that kind of thing. The only thing just caution on is somehow creating a serial meeting issue where, more than a quorum of you have talked about us or to a specific person. What I would recommend is if you could appoint an ad hoc committee to kind of deal with it, which would be like less than a quorum, 2 of you, to go deal with it on behalf of the board. But I think, if you individually are looking at talking to people about it or something, the best thing to do might be just mention it to them and point them towards the chief's direction. If they're interested, that keeps you from kind of getting close to a serial meeting. But does that make sense?
Yeah.
And if you want to do that approach, again, I started trying to find kind of what interest there would be. So what I could do is, as you get people that are interested, Caroline, I can start putting together a list, kind of pros and cons, or relevant qualifications of those individuals, and have that available for you in January. That would still give you some time. Again, we'd have till the February meeting to appoint somebody if that is the direction you want to go.
Shouldn't we publish this in the paper or?
Yes, we did have some discussions
Yeah.
to where, so we are actually required to, it has to be noticed several places, so we have that at the stations. But we could certainly publish this in the local newspapers and have kind of an outreach. But I do believe that, especially with this community, just making sure that we're reaching out to relevant groups, that they're making sure that there's an interest. There's some curiosity to see if any of the town council members who were not elected or interested town council members might be interested in this position. It is obviously a little different from serving on town council, so not always a good fit. I did reach out to some individuals such as Linda Salcedo, Stacy Corliss, just make sure they're keeping their eyes open. And if they think of someone that might be a good fit, that they point them in your direction. So I think it's important that we do a little bit of both, that we post it, put it out there, but also that we reach out to the community and see what we can find.
And I believe the Matty Act requires the notification, correct? I think for you guys as well. So,
Have we spoken to the, what's the name of the Fire Advisory Commission?
So that's a good question. The Fire Safe Council
But yeah,
is
Thank you.
an area that we could certainly pull from. Commissioner Mendel is not here, but he, one of the names that's come up is Dave Easterby, for example. There are other fire safe council members that could be good. I certainly agree with that. My only word of caution would be that we as a district need to do everything we can to support the fire safe council and start to help grow it. There was a recent law that was passed that being a fire wise community significantly can impact your insurance. So we just want to be careful that we're not pulling from one of our resources to another. Technically, the fire safe council is
That
not
makes
our
sense,
resource. But it is an area that we're going to be putting a lot of effort to try to bolster or support. Although I do agree they have some strong members there that might be a good fit.
So at this point, if somebody has some suggestions, who would they be speaking to?
I'm comfortable with either approach. Like mentioned by legal, we could either form a little ad hoc committee with two of you, and we could have some meetings to discuss where we're at. Or you could send people my direction and work with Caroline to start putting that together. And then we would report back to you in January on where we sit on that.
Okay.
So whichever you prefer.
What do you guys think? Do you want to have a little ad hoc committee?
I almost feel that it would be, my first impression is it would be more time efficient to, if we speak with somebody that's interested on an individual basis, just send them straight to Chief or Caroline, instead of having a committee that's got to get together, that's got to meet somebody, and then because I think if we individually speak to somebody that we think might be interested, they show an interest, then we can say, go talk to Chief or Caroline, rather than having to go back and forth a couple times. That's my concept.
And we're certainly comfortable with that. I just want to recognize that we are employees of this new boss. So we just, it's kind of at your comfort level
Right.
of how you want to do that. So
Yeah, would that be a legal way to do it for us to send them to you and, we're supposed to be representing the community?
I believe so. I mean, ultimately, you will be the ones appointing. We won't have anything to do with that. So
Yeah.
as long as you're comfortable with the information that we provide you with, and I'm sure legal will correct me if I misspeak, then we can certainly do that on your behalf. And then again, bring you the information that you request in January.
And you're okay with that?
Yes,
Not adding your workload too much more? I know you're busy.
it's probably one of the more important things is having a good board. So yes,
You're talking about appointing by February, correct?
that is correct. So we would have 60 days
So,
from the point at which Carol is off the board. So if
Yeah.
she's off the board December 31st, I believe our meeting in February, don't quote me, is January 20th. So we'd still have a window there. We could always do a special meeting if that was necessary. But fortunately, we have 3 months to get ahead of this issue. And hopefully, I'm hoping we can have this sorted by January, honestly. And there's probably no reason, if you found the perfect candidate, that we couldn't bring them on in the January meeting. I would be amazed if we got ahead on that, but there's nothing that stops or precludes us from doing that.
it goes to my point then of doing things by committee seems to always bog down the process. If I'm not mistaken.
Well, and you don't really have an item on this agenda to appoint a committee, so you probably have to do it at your January meeting anyway, so,
Well,
or December meeting, I'm sorry.
that's already time wasted then.
And my question is, do we have anything legally where we can refuse to, for resignation?
If you do, please let me know. I'd be excited to see it. So,
I second that.
Sorry about that, Carol. Surprise, surprise.
There's this whole indentured servitude issue, I think, that might run afoul of.
Well, I don't know if it's a time or place, but I'd sure like to thank you, Carol, for all your work.
Oh,
You've done a great job.
Yes,
Headed
absolutely.
up a bunch of different committees, and it's gonna be some big shoes to fill. So, thank you.
So to resolve the issue, where do we stand?
Yeah, I would not be in favor of an ad hoc committee. I agree with you.
Okay,
So if we find somebody, we're gonna send to see Chief Tomar first.
Yeah. if we have to drag them.
Yeah.
And Carol, you have a voice in this matter as well.
Mhm.
at this
Oh, yeah,
point.
I've been talking around.
Yeah, so are you on board with just, you find somebody that's, that you feel is good, and right
Yeah.
fit, and send them to chief?
Absolutely.
And then chief can let us know that we received
Absolutely.
John Doe and Mary Kay and, yeah,
Yes.
okay,
But we certainly need to put some thought into it and
yeah,
really start searching around for the right person.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where not having to do a committee makes sense to me. Okay,
Agreed.
Okay. I guess we have an agreement on that then.
Hmm.
Okay. Moving on to 10B. Tahoe Basin meetings with Incline North Tahoe, Olympic Valley and Truckee Fire.
So I know we've been running a little long, so I'm not going to bore you with a long update here, but I did go out to the Tahoe area a month ago. I think it was well worth it. I had some meetings that were planned and others that were spontaneous based off conversations I had up there. I'm first and foremost, I'm very proud of what we accomplished as a fire district. I think everybody in this room should be for a budget under 4 million. It's pretty darn amazing what we can do and what we kind of have to do by necessity being out here in a remote part of the Eastern Sierra. Picked up quite a few things, talked about the radio systems, talked about how they deal with administrative issues because they are fire districts like us. They don't have the staff capacity that towns have. Some of them are significantly larger. Incline, for example, has a budget of 14 million just on their operations side. They also have a defensible space program. Probably the most worthwhile thing is I spent a longer period with one of the division chiefs at Incline, and they've built out a pretty significant defensible space program out there. It started as a crew of about 4 or 5 people, and over the last 15 years, they now have 2 hand crews, 3 Type 3 engines, and some water tenders. So over 60 individuals that work for them on a summer basis. And it's funded primarily through grant opportunities. So it's about a $4 million program that I believe the district, don't quote me on this, Caroline, that's about 10%. So for me, it seems like a very natural fit for our area. We have a lot of people who look for seasonal jobs here, and people that come through our fire academy end up going to the Forest Service. If we can find a way to hold on to them, we could even do, kind of Roger's intent of staffing Station 2. So strategically, we're going to try to do some work. And the chief that I spoke with, he actually has a whole program. He gave me a whole bunch of papers because people come see them so regularly. They do this all the time. He's had districts from Texas come talk to him all over because they run a very good program out there. He recommended kind of start small and work your way up. The thing we have to be comfortable with is this is kind of in addition to what we have today, but it also, in order for it to work, this is a resource we have to get out, kind of traveling across the state, picking up experience, because what looks right, as Chief Revault would say, that 10 years, we could have a couple engine companies out here and people that have that experience, that have run those wildland calls. If something comes here, they are ready for it. And I think that it's a good opportunity for the district, especially when you start aligning it with things like the Donut Project, the work that they could do in district, to protect us, and the relationships we have with Cal OES. I'd be looking to see if there's an opportunity for Cal OES to get us a rig that we could have. Not that we don't have enough rigs, but it creates opportunities for us to get these individuals out on more incidents. And again, it could benefit the community in the sense that we'd have better fire protection. It could benefit the district and giving jobs to people that would be pretty good jobs, would work well with kind of that summer season that we have here where everybody's busy. And overall, I'm cautiously optimistic this is a program we could really put to use here. So that was probably the main meeting I had that I think has a lot of value.
Nice.
All right, thank you for that update. And update on the sphere of influence and the municipal services review.
Yep.
Yeah,
So as you're aware, I traveled out to Madera. I met with Jay Varney, the CAO out there, just letting them know that we'd be looking to pursue this. They were supportive, although he gave me some things that I ran through legal just to make sure we're doing everything appropriately. Also, things align with the county LAFCO deciding that they need to do a municipal services review anyways. So our request is basically getting funneled under that whole municipal services review. I'm actually meeting with the consultant tomorrow to go over because I'm having a little trouble getting information from all the other fire districts. I feel confident in our annexation request. Everything looks relatively good. It just makes sense. Assuming that we move through the municipal review and that annexation does occur, we would bring it back to the board to see kind of what next steps are, because it could have ERAF implications, and making sure that we understand what those are. And that's the next step that this board wants to take. But right now, again, just kind of working through the municipal services review process, and making sure we truly understand all the implications. So.
Thank you for that. And you want to talk about the wildland?
Yeah, I'll
update?
just give you a real quick, been working with White Bark a decent amount. I think I'm meeting with them tomorrow afternoon. Just on a couple of things, there's parcels in town that we're ultimately responsible, the big ones being Camp High Sierra that Captain Shugart and Chief Morrow have been working on quite a bit, the Bell-shaped parcel, and then Mammoth Creek is the other big one. And then Valentine Reserve is obviously kind of the target hazard out there in Old Mammoth. So working on all of those that we have responsibilities for, but also working with the Forest Service to make sure that the 1,000-acre priorities around town are appropriate. Those were gone over from the Forest Service. Jason Wingard and Chance are kind of the main fire operations individuals. Taro Pacino, who used to work up here, is also working on that down from Bishop, and they worked with Chief Fremont and Chief Morrow. I added a little corner right behind Panorama Dome that was not in the initial plan, and it actually basically the lake basin funnels down into Old Mammoth right there, and there's a big patch of down trees. Looking at it with Chance, they agree that that's a priority area that we have to take care of, especially when you consider the fact that if the fire did get past that proposed area that they add, they're not allowed to do some work in the Mill City tract due to the soil contamination that occurred out there. So overall, I think that the 10,000 acre prioritization is great, but we are having some input and making sure that we're really hitting what we believe are target hazards. The Forest Service has been very supportive with us on those. So that actually covered both those items. And then if I could cover the last one real quick.
Okay.
So walking these larger projects, it became very relevant that this is just a much bigger scale than anything we've ever done here before. We've done quite a few thinning projects. We've had CAL FIRE crews come up. A few weeks ago, we had contractors come up. I think it was about 14 contractors, and they came from all over California, Nevada, and we're moving a significant amount of material out of both inside town and outside of town. And the problem is, what do you do with it? It was like, well, we're going to chip it and put it on the ski area. That works for a while. They're like, no. These are going to be piles of chips. They're 100 feet tall if you try to do that. And there's nowhere to put this stuff. And White Bark's gotten pretty aware of this. This is obviously part of their scoping of their program. And right now, the one solution that seems most appropriate is a regional biomass facility. What that essentially means is a big furnace that burns this wood, or there's different methods that it can use, and then creates electricity with it for the most part. There's different ways that can work. There's nothing in this area of that size and scale. White Bark had a consultant to look at options. What makes the most sense is putting something out by Ormat, because Ormat they use some similar processes with their heating and cooling to where they can use some of the same infrastructure. It also would tie directly into the grid, which is an important part for this. And it would also be close to where all the materials are coming from. So the county was looking at things in Levining, and they just start to make less sense, because then you have to truck all this wood material to Levining, and it starts to not make sense financially. So the tough thing about this is it does need somebody to help kind of lead that process. I've been working with Janet Hatfield. I'll be sitting in a bunch of meetings the next few months to help support it. The fire district's not in a position to kind of be the lead facilitator of this, It'd be great if somebody from the town or county could honestly kind of take the lead on this. But just for the board's information, I think it's important that this isn't just a biomass facility. This whole project doesn't work if we don't have somewhere to put this material. So it's pretty key that that piece gets solved. So if it comes up in conversations, you know, it is something that the district should be attempting to support some sort of solution on.
Absolutely. That's an interesting thing, but certainly need to support that. All those chips, wow. Okay, do we have any comments from the association today?
I believe we skipped board member and legal at the bottom.
Oh, yeah, number 11. Board member
Let me get into that.
comments.
Any board member comments? Legal counsel advice?
Nothing additionally.
Okay. Comments from the association? Any announcements? Administrative business?
So we ended up putting both meetings on the agenda, just so you're aware of both of those. In the past, often the district has skipped the December meeting just because it's a busy time for everybody with the holidays. We're also pretty busy with call volume picking up significantly. I'm comfortable administratively if we skip that meeting, but it's, you know, your call. So wanted to give you both as an option, December 20th or January 17th.
Why don't we, or my suggestion would be to skip the meeting unless there's something comes up, you need to have a quick special meeting.
In favor of that.
We can certainly do that. Something else?
Yeah. Two more items, if the board members could stay after the meeting to sign the October special meeting minutes, and then I'll make the corrections to the September meeting minutes. And I also need one more signature on paychecks. So if I could just grab two of you to stick
I
around.
can do the paychecks.
Okay,
I
sounds good.
wasn't at the special meeting, so. Okay, any other comments or anything anybody needs to say?
Well, I guess this is Carol's last meeting then.
Just really quick, are we gonna hold off on the adoption of the ordinance
Oh.
or do we do that and I
They-
missed it or?
Oh, I forget.
What was the question?
We adopt,
They adopted.
we
Yeah,
adopted.
we adopted.
Okay, I just kind of missed that.
Roger, you were,
I was just saying, this is Carol's last meeting then, so I want to add my comments too, and thank you for all of your work. I mean, my God, you did most of the work for the whole board.
Oh, get out of here.
With, I don't know, I was, you were somebody that we could count on. When it was something that was, we didn't want to do, we pass it over to you. And you do a terrific job, so we're gonna miss you.
Oh, well, thank you. I really appreciate, I really enjoyed my time working with everybody too. And I'm amazed at the fire department, what they accomplished with so few people and small budget. You guys are real professionals.
that's for sure.
I'd like to just add that I'm just amazed and so grateful that you accepted to become a board member and have been such a valuable asset to the whole board and to the department. So thank you for your service so much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Okay, on that note, meeting adjourned. 1:35.